Welcome to the October 29th Long Range Planning Committee, LRPC, the 6045 Wilson Boulevard Special GLUP Study. We'll be holding a hybrid public meeting which enables remote electronic participation as legally authorized by the Code of Virginia per the Planning Commission's electronic meeting policy adopted on July 7th, 2022. Are any commissioners participating remotely? Well, members of the LRPC are participating both here in person and potentially virtually through electronic means. At this time, I'd like to orient everyone to our hybrid environment and cover a few specifics on how tonight's meeting will run. Members of the public may attend the meeting here in person or electronically by using the Microsoft Teams link provided on the LRPC web pages, the county's events calendar, and the email notification sent to LRPC ZOCO email subscribers. Additionally, there's a dial-in phone option for those who wish to use it. For our planning commissioners joining virtually, if anyone loses internet connectivity during today's meeting, please reconnect with us by phone. Please keep your phones and devices muted until you're called upon. Turn off sound to any other devices around you to minimize interference. And for our virtual attendees using Microsoft Teams, please turn your video feed off. We will address when it's appropriate for you to turn it on. The Microsoft Teams meeting chat is active for two purposes only. First, to assist participants who need technical support, and second, for participants to pose brief clarifying questions to the larger audience. While the clarifying questions will be monitored, they will not be formally acknowledged. Staff may address these comments as appropriate. The Teams chat should not be used for discussion or inappropriate statements. Those who are planning to provide public comment may do so at the end of the meeting, as the chat may not be used for that purpose. All public comments must be shared verbally for the record during the assigned public testimony periods. Also, please note, everybody needs to speak up so that, not only up, but also clearly, and towards the microphone to allow our virtual participants to hear. If commissioners participating virtually wish to be recognized to speak on an item during the course of the meeting, please turn your video feed on and raise your virtual hand in Teams. We will monitor the video feeds. Okay. Additional notes for members of the public who would like to provide feedback and comment. Unlike the Planning Commission's regular meetings, the LRPC agenda is not a public hearing. Therefore, public comment is at the LRPC chair's discretion. I will call on speakers at the end of the meeting after the committee discussion has concluded. Members of the public attending virtually will speak first, followed by in-person attendees. The speaking time allotted will depend on the number of speakers we have this evening. And if you are here in person, please add your name to the speaker list on the table. Virtual attendees, please indicate in the chat if you'd like to provide comment, and your name will be added to the list of speakers. Ms. Alfonso Ahmed will acknowledge your request in the Teams chat. When virtual attendees are called upon to speak, please unmute yourself by clicking on the microphone icon that is located on your meeting command bar. The moderator does not have the ability to unmute you. You will be muted when your time is concluded. As an alternative, public comment may always be provided on the public comment form posted on the LRPC webpage. Lastly, this is a public forum. Today's meeting will be recorded and posted on the county website. All information associated with today's meeting, whether written or spoken, is subject to the Freedom of Information Act requirements. All right. Best work yet. All right. So we will go around the room and introduce ourselves so we can get acquainted with one another. Devanshi Patel, Chair of LRPC and a member of the Planning Commission.
All right. And Natasha Alfonso, LRPC Coordinator. Margaret Rhodes, Planning.
Bob Benson, representing the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission.
Eric Burke, I'm a member of the Planning Commission.
Terry Schwartzbeck, representing the Dominion Hill Civic Association.
Peter Robertson, Planning Commission.
Ryan Normile, applicant, PCN Homes.
Todd Munger, Arlington Land Use Group, attorney for the applicant.
Jill Barker, Park and Recreation Commission.
Jennifer Smith, the staff, Planning Commission.
And Tony Striner, Planning Commission.
And then we have people here as well.
I'm Barnes Lawson. I'm one of the owners of. That's the subject of this application.
Alan Frank, and I'm one of the managing members of the LLC that owns the.
Frank Foley, representing part of the applicant team.
Okay.
Hi,
I'm Todd Stevader. I'm a neighbor. I live across the street from the property.
Wonderful, thank you. All right, so, oh, online, I know we have Chris Ty, is that right?
Yes, that is correct. From
Thank
I'm the acting president of Boulevard Manor Civic Association.
Thank you very much. Do we have any other people from our membership roster? Any other planning commissioners present? Anyone from Transportation Commission? Housing Commission?
Hey, sorry, I can't be there in person. This is Zach Linick representing the Housing Commission.
Hi, Zach, thank you. Okay, so we can begin now. Yes? Yes, fantastic. So now that we have set up our logistics and our testing and we've given our speech and our welcome, we are now on the agenda item. So we'll start with staff presentation.
Yes,
Thank you.
and we'll hand it over to Margaret, who's leading us off.
Okay, thank you, Margaret.
Margaret Rhodes with the Planning Division.
Can everybody hear? Chris, can you?
Yes, if she could just get a little bit closer to the mic, that'd be great. But yeah, I can hear her.
Okay,
Sure. I think the mic is an aerial mic now, but I'll try my best. So today we're going to walk through some background information on the special general land use plan study process. We're going to look at the requested amendment, and then I'm going to turn it over to Natasha to talk us through some of the existing planning guidance and site conditions for this site. Then we're going to turn it over to the applicant for a very brief presentation. And then Natasha is going to pick it back up for the staff analysis and our preliminary findings. And then we're going to move to an LRPC discussion. Next slide. So the county board adopted the policy for the consideration of general land use plan amendments unanticipated by previous planning efforts in 2008. This process calls for a community review process in those instances where there is either no adopted plan or where the adopted plan or where the amendment request is inconsistent with the guidance of the relevant adopted plan. Special general land use plan studies evaluate the appropriateness of the requested general land use plan change and evaluate other general land use plan categories that may be appropriate. Following a number of process revisions in 2019, we adopted a two-tiered approach. On the next slide, you can see the typical sequence for our public reviews. So the tier 1 review really asks the question, should this be studied? And if so, through what process? And then tier 2 is a high-level look at what general land use plan category or categories may be appropriate. It also looks at what other guidance may be appropriate. And then it focuses in on some very high-level questions related to land use density, zoning, transitions, transportation, et cetera. And the outcome of a tier 2 study is a request to either advertise or not to advertise a general land use plan amendment. And it's important to note that no general land use plan amendment change is made at that time. The next level of review is a potential site plan review. And this level of review is much more specific. So we're looking at a specific redevelopment application and trying to decide if this application is appropriate. There's a more in-depth focus on height, density, architecture, access and circulation, et cetera. And if it is determined at the end of the site plan review committee process that there is an appropriate site plan application, then at that time, the general land use plan and the zoning may be amended concurrently with that site plan application moving forward to the Planning Commission and County Board. So looking at this particular site on the next slide, we can see that this is a small site and there is limited topographical change across the site. There are no historic resources here. It's bordered by 2 streets. And we anticipate that the impacts from the potential low scale or low density residential redevelopment that is being discussed are limited in scope. And so therefore we are recommending a combined approach combining elements of both tiers 1 and tier 2. In terms of our stakeholder group, you can see that we are attempting to have a very broad and inclusive stakeholder group. So at the LRPC table, the virtual table, we have representatives from the Housing Commission, the Park and Recreation Commission, the Transportation Commission, the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission, the Dominion Hills and Boulevard Manor Civic Associations, and the applicant. And we have also notified with flyers all the homeowners on the subject block and the Arlington Community Church and the commercial building across from the site. We also provided a flyer to each of the business owners in the Dominion Hill Shopping Center. And we also notified by email a representative from Nova Parks. In terms of what we look at for the special general land use plan study, we look at various process criteria. We look at support for county goals. Would the amendment possibly advance broader county goals? We also look at existing planning guidance. Is there already an existing adopted plan or other planning guidance for this area? And in this instance, there is no adopted plan for this area. Has there been a change in conditions, and what conditions have changed to warrant potentially revisiting the policy? Is there a relevant ongoing process? Is the area currently under study? In this case, no. And then looking at the surrounding context, is this part of a larger or more complex site? Are surrounding properties similar in character? Should they potentially be included in the study? Would it be more appropriate to look at this area through a small area plan, for instance? And then lastly, is there a phase development site plan involved? And in this case, no. And then we have developed this process, and you could see that through the broad and inclusive stakeholder group with a mind towards equity. The LRPC and the community engagement, as well as the study analysis, are all crafted with attention to the equity principles to ensure equitable representation and awareness throughout the study. And as I mentioned, the composition of the LRPC is purposely broad. And with regards to the requested amendment, the applicant is requesting a general land use plan amendment from service commercial and low residential 1 to 10 units per acre to low medium residential, along with a requested from C1, which is a local commercial district, and R6, a one family dwelling district, to RE18, which is a multiple family dwelling district. And they are proposing townhouse development on the site. Townhouses are potentially compatible with the surrounding single detached development. The site is developed currently with a small commercial building and a large surface parking lot. The site, as we just noted, has a split general land use plan and zoning designations. So the service commercial and the low residential, and the C1 and the R6 zoning. A GLUP amendment would be necessary to provide for the type of residential development that the applicant is proposing. And now I'm going to turn it over to Natasha to give us a more in-depth look at the sites.
Thanks, Margaret. Okay, so the site is located at the northwest corner of Wilson and Livingston Street. It's approximately 1.5 miles to the nearest metro station, which is in East Falls Church. Wilson is an arterial road with metro bus service, and the site, as you can see, is surrounded primarily by single-family homes on the same block, the Dominion Hills Commercial Center to the east, and the Arlington Community Church in 2 parts to the south, which include the Upton Hill Regional Park and Escape Park. The site has a 3-story office building that was built in 1967 with approximately 14,000 square feet of GFA. It is over 37,000 square feet, which is just under an acre. There's approximately 40% of tree canopy cover, which consists of multiple species. And the greatest number of the mature trees that you see on the site can be found in the northeast and northwest portions of the site, in addition to street trees along the north. The west side of the site is at a lower grade elevation, approximately 8 feet lower than the single family homes. Over half of the site is designated service commercial. The balance is low residential, which allows for single family detached with a maximum density of 1 to 10 units per acre. The site is almost completely surrounded by low res with public and semi-public uses to the south and service commercial uses to the east. A large portion of the site is zoned C1. The northern portion is actually zoned for R6. The shopping center to the east is actually also zoned C1, whereas the church to the south is R6 and the parks are S3A. R6 allows for single-family detached dwellings at 7 units per acre or a minimum of 6,000 square feet per lot. C1 also allows for single-family detached as well as low-intensity commercial centers and other non-residential uses. The maximum height that is allowed or permitted in both of these districts is 35 feet or 3 stories. So development on the site is guided by policies and various elements of the comp plan. We've already talked about the existing land use designations as designated in the GLUB. The Affordable Housing Master Plan promotes a diverse and inclusive community by ensuring access to affordable housing. The Historic and Cultural Resources Plan identifies the surrounding Dominion Hills neighborhood as a National Register of Historic Places. The Forestry and Natural Resources Plan establishes guidance on biophilic design, conservation, and tree canopy goals. The Master Transportation Plan classifies all streets within Arlington with specific criteria, as you see here, for the number of lanes, speed, level of transit service, bike facilities, sidewalks, parking, and driveway access. The MTP does classify Wilson Boulevard as a type B arterial and Livingston Street as a neighborhood local street. So in addition to the adopted policies in the comp plan, the Commercial Market Resiliency Initiative, which is currently in phase 2, seeks to address the oversupply of office buildings by introducing new policies and zoning tools that help reposition and convert some of these obsolete buildings. So taking this into account, as well as the increase in jobs that we've seen and population overall in the region, there is an opportunity on this site to reconsider the existing policies for commercial office and allow residential uses instead, which we believe could enhance the neighborhood and conserve more of the existing tree canopy. The Dominion Hills Neighborhood Conservation Plan was created by the community in 2004. While this document is not necessarily an adopted policy by the county board, staff does take into consideration the community's vision for the area, which includes, as you see here, preserving the low-density residential character of the neighborhood with building heights no greater than 35 feet, eliminating utility poles, burying the utility wires along major traffic arteries like Wilson, increasing pedestrian safety, and implementing bicycle lanes and consistent street lighting throughout. So at this time, I'm going to hand it over to the applicant to make their presentation. I just need to stop sharing this for a second so I can pull up their slides. Let's see.
And in the meantime, I think we have a few people clock in. Tenley, do you want to introduce yourself?
Sure, Tenley Peterson, Planning Commission.
Dia Bagley, Planning Commission.
Josh Handler, I'm kind of dual-headed away and doubling up with Bob on the Forestry and Natural Resources Commission. And also I live in the Boulevard Manor Civic Association.
Okay, so you're here on behalf of Boulevard then?
Yes, I guess so, yes.
Oh, that's Chris on it. So you're here in a residential capacity because Chris is here as well. Yes, okay.
Yeah, quite in the, we live on Livingston Street.
Okay, perfect. Thank you. All right. The elevator's not working. I told you it smelled like fire.
Well, I think the code, it hasn't been to security feature, doesn't mention it.
But it smells like fire, so it's probably a good thing.
Smells like fire.
You let me know.
I'm ready whenever you all are. Okay, so good evening, everyone. My name again is Tad Lundgren with the Arlington Land Use Group, attorney for the applicant, BCN Enterprises. Many of you already know and are familiar with BCN. It's an Arlington-based company that has done hundreds of residential projects here in Arlington, amongst other ventures. Next slide. Just some quick contextual history of the site. It is a period-built office building constructed around 1966. Its architecture and site layout is typical of its era, with a heavy concrete office building and a very large surface parking lot, which occupies the entire property. It is located at the west end of Wilson before you reach the Falls Church line near McKinley Elementary School, next to Dominion Hills Shopping Center, up the hill from Bluemont Park, and across the street from the skate park, the rain park, the Dominion Hills Pool and Clubhouse, and Upton Hill Regional Park. The building is currently and has been largely vacant, and it is no longer a viable, sustainable asset. We spent a considerable amount of time studying what could be successful and sustainable at this location heading into the future. Next slide. So this is just a few more slides of the views around the site to give it some visual context of what you actually see when you're on the street looking around. You can see the view at the top looking east down Wilson toward the hill toward Bluemont. And again, backing up a bit so where you can see with the church. And then the view directly across the street is parkland. Next slide. Our analysis of what could be successful and what could be sustainable in the long term at the site, started with the site's GLUP history, which provided that this site, in addition to the Dominion Hills Shopping Center, has been consistently either planned or zoned for service commercial uses since the club's adoption in 1961, while being surrounded by a vast residential community now generally known as Dominion Hills and Boulevard Manor, and the major public open space resources of Upton Hill Regional Park, Powhatan Springs Park, and Bluemont and Bon Air Park. Clearly, this location is entirely incompatible with the modern office demand, and there is no question office uses are a viable option here. After assessing the site's limitations for office uses, we reviewed the GLUP zoning ordinance, the Dominion Hills Conservation Plan, and relevant county precedent, and concluded that townhouse development is the most compatible option. This approach aligns with market demand and Arlington's goals to diversify housing options along residential edges, providing a balanced transition from the higher traffic Dominion Hills Shopping Center, Wilson Boulevard, and nearby open spaces. Townhouses will enhance the neighborhood character and support the community fabric, offering an integration of uses between commercial and residential areas while respecting the surrounding environment and setting. Next slide. Given that we found townhouses are the most compatible and sustainable use at this location, we conducted an analysis of which GLUP designations had historically been used for this type of development in areas predominantly surrounded by large residential neighborhoods with large public open space resources. In doing so, we found that a countywide use of the RA districts at low-medium residential designations on the GLUP, particularly with frontages on major arterials, had been successfully implemented and utilized for decades. In fact, this is the purpose for the creation and use of the RA district specifically. When it came to what level of density would be appropriate at the site, we again looked to the market and county guidance. We know that there will be substantial costs to develop this site, remove the existing concrete and asbestos office building, remove the huge parking lot, as well as having to bear the cost of a site plan process in Arlington County and utilities that have not been touched in many decades. We also reviewed and considered the most recent adopted public policy relating to density adopted by the county board just last year. For the R districts which surround the site, staff and the county board recommend 6 dwelling units per 6,000 square foot lots, or put in other words, 43 units per acre in this location in Arlington, as well as the recommendation to provide additional diversity in housing typology in these areas. All of these considerations invariably led to our application for the proposal before you tonight, which is for a GLUP designation of low-medium residential and the RA18 zoning district, which allows for a range of 16 to 36 units per acre. Next slide. Although we haven't spent any time or money on designing any specific project, we did analyze the site and conduct quote unquote test fits to see how a site of this size might accommodate a low medium residential townhouse development. Next slide. We took the opportunity to tighten up our test fit analysis for tonight's discussion so that we could establish that the site can accommodate approximately 16 units and still provide about 57% of the site as open space. 16 units gets the economics of the site to work. This equates to approximately 21 units per acre. We would welcome a recommendation this evening that low-medium residential is an appropriate glove destination with the noted restriction of up to 21 units per acre rather than at the higher 36 units per acre rated, the higher 36 units per acre rate contemplated by the glove. Next slide. This slide is representative of some of the architectural typology we might consider, with particular focus on brick construction and in observance of the predominant brick colonial style found in Dominion Hills, which we will further explore in a subsequent site plan process, hopefully. And with that, I'll turn it back over to staff.
1 second. So I can
If you have your camera on, would you mind turning it off until we get to the time for you to be called upon to speak? Thank you.
Okay. All right, so this part of the presentation is going to focus on the staff's analysis, similar to what the applicant did in terms of doing some site studies and test fits. So basically of the potential development scenarios of the site and some of the preliminary findings from those studies. So starting off, to encourage context-sensitive development and good urban design, staff is proposing 4 guiding principles, which include, as you see here, 1, to ensure the building scale, massing, and materials complement and transition well to the surrounding area. 2, the development provide for attractive and welcoming pedestrian level conditions. 3, that it enhances access, connectivity, and safety for all modes of travel. And 4, that it prioritizes green space, tree conservation, and sustainability. So those were the guiding principles in our thinking when we were looking at the site and the potential development scenarios. So we analyzed various scenarios under various zoning districts that allow multifamily as well as townhouses, and that are associated with glove designations including low and low medium residential. The preliminary site studies are intended to illustrate various scales of development and trade-offs associated with density, building height, lot coverage, tree canopy coverage, and building placement, orientation, and scale. So the scenarios are not really intended to convey any preferred development concept by staff. We're just really trying to understand the pros and cons of various scales of development. So here you can see more clearly what we said about the existing tree canopy and topography. The image on the left highlights where the existing tree canopy is along the northeast and northwest portions of the site and along Wilson. The image on the right shows the contour lines, which highlight that the west side of the site is at a lower grade elevation than the single family homes. So in terms of pedestrian and bicycle connectivity, both street frontages have, as you can see here in the photos, narrow sidewalks, very limited space for tree planting, and above ground utilities. Wilson has a buffered bike lane on both sides of the road, and the vehicular access is primarily off Wilson and Livingston. And as you can see in the diagram, there are 2 driveways along Wilson that create conflict points for bicyclists. Sorry, I was supposed to click in the animation. So today I'm going to show you 5 different scenarios that staff analyze. The scenario on this slide is for multifamily development, and it can be approved by right under RA 818. The maximum density allowed in that district by right for multifamily is 36 units per acre, which this layout accommodates without exceeding the lot coverage of 56% and without modifications to setbacks. The scenario that you see here shows a 4-story typical double-loaded building with a courtyard facing east. The parking, lobby, and common areas are on the ground floor with units on the upper floors. As you can see, the parking has access off both street frontages, which results in very limited areas with active ground floor uses along the streets. In this scenario, the overall building mass and scale is significantly greater than the surrounding context. The scenario on this slide is for townhouse development, and it's one of 4 townhouse scenarios that we analyze. This layout accommodates 16 units, but requires modifications to lot coverage and setback standards, which can really only be approved through site plan under either RA 818 or R 1530T. And I will point out that R 1530T townhouses are only approved by site plan. In this layout, buildings are oriented perpendicular to Livingston Street, and the setbacks along Wilson have been reduced significantly to accommodate more buildings on the site and provide more space between the building groups. So while this scenario eliminates the driveway along Wilson, the reduced setback along that street frontage and the need to accommodate the rear access for the units truly impacts the existing tree canopy along both the north side and south sides of the site. This layout accommodates slightly less, 14 units overall, without exceeding the lot coverage of 56% and without any modifications to setbacks. So this is slightly better. This scenario can be approved by right under RA 818, RA 1426, and as I said earlier, through site plan under R 1530T. In this layout, the buildings are oriented parallel to Livingston Street. The units, again, have rear access garages, of which half of them are facing the street and the other half are facing the retention wall, which is approximately 8 feet along the west side. Again, while this scenario is quite efficient and it's better than the previous one by eliminating the driveway along Wilson, it does place, again, a very large building along the west side because it is parallel to the single family development. So in the next couple of slides, I'm going to show you some examples of existing multifamily and townhouse developments along Wilson, west of Glebe Road. So like the first three scenarios that I shared, these examples range in density between 16 to 36 units per acre. So again, in that low medium bluff category. The Patrick Henry apartments on the left are located on the very west end along the county line. As you can see, the multifamily buildings are across the street from single family, not necessarily abutting them. And they do abut a larger multifamily complex to the south, which is in Falls Church. The Carlisle townhouses are located between Arlington Mill and George Mason and are within 1 mile from Metro. The site, as you can see, abuts single family development along 2 sides and service commercial on the other 2 sides. One thing to point out here is that over half of the units are not facing the street, and that's mainly because, again, the development is trying to maximize the number of units on the site. The Boston Park and Abingdon Court townhouses are actually further away from the site. They are less than ½ mile from Metro. Both developments abut single family. The Boston Park example, all of the units actually face the street or a public space. Whereas in Abingdon, which is the one on the right, only 40% of the units actually face a street. And again, Abingdon tries to maximize the density. And so to do that, the spacing, as you can see here, between the building groups, it's actually very narrow and ranges anywhere between 10 to 20 feet, which really doesn't allow for much privacy between the units or even light, throughout the day. You can even see the shadows casted at the time of the day the picture was taken. So moving along, I'm going to go into the third and fourth townhouse scenarios that we analyzed, which both can be approved under R 1530T, again through site plan. Both layouts can accommodate 12 units total without exceeding the lot coverage of 56% and without reducing the setbacks along the street frontages or anywhere. Scenario 3, which is this one on the screen, shows units with rear access, of which 2/3 are facing the street and the other third are facing that retention wall. The vehicular access is off Livingston, with circulation occurring in the middle of the site. This layout eliminates the driveway again along Wilson, which improves the pedestrian and bicycle access. It conserves most of the tree canopy on site and provides smaller building footprints, which results overall in a smaller building scale, particularly along the single family edges. So scenario 4 has a different site configuration. In this layout, the buildings are actually oriented to either face a street or a private common open space on the northeast corner of the site. This option, again, allows for the rear access units, but the units along the west side actually have garages instead of front yards facing the retention wall, which is always better. So like scenario 3, this option Eliminates the driveway, conserves most of the tree canopy, and provides smaller building footprint. However, it does have a much lower lot coverage than all the other scenarios and provides more green space. So one last example of an existing townhouse development. This one is on Walter Reed Road. It is part of this is a mixed-use development, 1 block from Columbia Pike, that consists of 14 condo units and 8 townhouses. The site, as you can see, about single-family development is on the edge of the district. The reason for showing this is really just to point out how the townhouses are oriented. As you can see, the longest building is actually perpendicular to the single-family edges, lining the street, rather than parallel, and provides sufficient setbacks from the single-family lot. And as you can see, all the units are facing the street. So let me slow down here. I know I've thrown a lot. So this slide is intended to really just provide a side-by-side comparison of the 5 scenarios in terms of density, lot coverage, whether it requires setback reductions and therefore impacts the tree canopy, as well as scale and massing along the single-family edges. Those were the things that we thought were the most critical. And the takeaway here really is that the first townhouse scenario has the greatest lot coverage overall and impacts on the tree canopy. And multifamily and the townhouse scenarios 1 and 2 have also the greatest scale and massing along the single-family edges. This slide shows the potential change in GLUB designation in various zoning districts that these scenarios can be approved under. So as you can see, the higher density scenarios, which include the multifamily, and the first 2 townhouse layouts can be approved under low medium residential, and the 3rd and 4th townhouse scenario can be approved under low residential, 11 to 15 units per acre. So there are many pros and cons with changing the GLUB on this site to low medium residential. The overall benefit is, of course, that it allows for townhouses and multifamily development, which supports reinvestment and additional housing options, which, as we know, is a county-wide goal. The drawback, however, is that it does allow for townhouse and multifamily development by right, which means less community engagement, no affordable housing contribution, and limited input on building scale, massing, and other important design elements. The other one thing to consider is that there are really no other sites in the immediate vicinity with this GLUB category, and it would set a precedent of higher density in areas that are not necessarily closer to metro or adjacent, or importantly, adjacent to the ordinance. So it's setting precedent.
Would you be able to turn your camera off and also mute yourself, please? Thank you.
All right, so this is a map of townhouse projects that have been approved under the low medium GLUB designation and R1532 zoning district. This is one combination that we looked at and wanted to show you as an example. As you can see, all but one of these sites are in a planning corridor. However, all of the sites, and I know this isn't superimposed over the land use or the GLUB map, but all of these sites are actually adjacent to existing multifamily townhouses and other commercial development development that is more intense. So the county does have a precedent of designating low medium residential areas, mainly in planning corridors or in larger geographic areas where there's either an existing development pattern that is more dense, such as garden style apartments or even older townhomes, or in areas where, again, because of some kind of planning study, it's anticipating more density. All right, so there are several benefits with changing the GLUB designation to low residential, again, with the higher density of 11 to 15 units per acre. This category allows for additional density, but only modestly higher than the surrounding low residential, which, as Margaret mentioned, is 1 to 10 units per acre. Under this category, the townhouse at that scale would have to could only be allowed through site plan, which again provides more opportunity for community input on building scale, massing, all the design elements, and of course, affordable housing contributions. So staff has conducted a trip generation analysis for all of the 5 scenarios, and what that analysis shows is that the number of potential trips associated with each of the scenarios are really expected to be lower than the number of trips that we see today with the existing commercial use. And so the existing transportation system is expected to support the development. As Margaret explained, staff did conduct an extensive analysis to answer the questions around equity. The main people who will benefit from this development are existing and future Arlington residents who will certainly find a place to live in this neighborhood. No one in particular is expected to be burdened. From an architectural and a transportation standpoint, the low-scale residential development is probably going to have less impact on the surrounding area than the existing office uses, which bring more traffic. Now, in terms of who is missing, if the housing that is built here is higher end, luxury townhouse development, then as we know, this could exclude or would exclude those that are affected by the housing crisis, which are those particularly in need of affordable housing. And we know this because the area demographics indicate that 28% of the surrounding population are persons of color. All right, so to wrap up, the last 3 slides here summarize staff's preliminary findings. As Margaret stated at the beginning of the presentation, the level of analysis the staff has conducted here is normally more than what we normally do for a tier 1 special bluff study. And so we believe that this analysis is sufficient for the site because, again, to reiterate, 1, the site is very small, it's less than an acre. The uses around it are generally uniform, and there really is no need to do a more extensive site design analysis or guidance than what we've already done. The site is adjacent to only 2 roadways. It's not in a metro corridor, so a more extensive transportation analysis is not warranted. There are no historic preservation concerns. There is very little topographical change, no major stormwater considerations. The site is not located in an area that's planned for mixed use or commercial development, and the county's not thinking of changing it, at least not now or without some kind of broader study. As the applicant stated, they are not interested in continuing the commercial use on the site, and we're not planning for it. And we anticipate a lower density residential development. So for those reasons, we need to do any more analysis from a tier 1 than a tier 1. Sorry, I went too fast. Okay, so in terms of land use, we stated the pros and cons of the various potential bluff designations. We did look at the possibility of maintaining the service commercial low residential bluff designation, and felt that that doesn't necessarily align with the market realities, as we know, and the challenges for sustaining office and commercial development. As we've stated, changing the bluff to low medium could enable either by right development, limited community input, or greater density and height. However, the low residential can provide for more compatible uses and density with the surrounding context, and it can help us to balance growth with good design that hopefully takes into account a lot of the natural site features. Okay, so in terms of design, as we said, there are many trade-offs associated with maximizing the density and site efficiency. The scenarios that we showed highlighted that reducing the setbacks leads primarily to loss of tree canopy, greater lot coverage results in less green areas, and less space between buildings means less privacy, light, and air. So staff's preference for this site is to, 1, provide sensitive transitions to the adjacent single-family, conserve trees, provide site access off of Livingston, provide bicycle parking and scooter corrals, provide wider sidewalks on both street frontages. Thank you for your patience. There's a lot to unpack there from this analysis, but I'm going to hand it over now to Margaret, who's going to kick us off on the LRPC discussion.
So in terms of our discussion tonight, some of the questions that we were suggesting for the discussion would be, are there any clarifying questions, first of all, on the materials that we presented? Are there any proposed refinements to the 4 guiding principles that we shared? And then we would like to hear your thoughts on the trade-offs associated with maximizing density and site efficiency. And we'd also, of course, like your input on the general land use plan amendment itself, and has sufficient information been provided and through this tier 1, sort of hybrid tier 1, tier 2 review. So those are their primary questions, and we really want to hear from you, and then we'll take that information back as we determine what the most appropriate general land use plan category.
Okay, let me just ask Josh, Did you have, do you want me to add you to the public comment? Would you like to give a public comment at the end? Trying to assess the time that's necessary
Yeah,
for public comment.
Yeah, should the conversation first.
Okay. I'm gonna add you here. So we have, I think you, Josh, are both of you making a public comment tonight?
I'll speak on our behalf.
Just one? Okay, so anybody online that's wishing to make a public comment? So Right.
Is that different than the representatives from the civic associations?
I'm sorry?
Is what you're asking different from the input from the civic association officials?
So Chris, you're at the table right now. So when we go around for our conversation, when we go around, for
Copy
the
that.
you will participate in that discussion.
Copy that. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. All right, so what we'll do is, I know we have a number of people on the applicant team that are on the public comment form. Is that right?
Well, we're the owners.
Okay, so you're speaking as, all right. All right, so everybody who is on public comment will get 2 minutes to speak. There's 8 people that are giving public comment, so.
Now we could do have a hand raised.
Okay.
Audience, so if it's for clarification, it was Michael, I don't see his last name at the moment.
Michael, are you planning on giving public comment?
Yes, please.
Okay, thank you.
So that's, if that helps with.
Yeah, so Chris and I think Terry, you're from transportation. If Chris and Terry, can you turn on your camera so we can see you just in case? Perfect, thank you. All right, so, okay, you guys, we're just gonna do it like we normally do it. Oh, no, we're not gonna do it like we normally do it, Eric, you know?
Be on your best behavior is what you always tell me.
Act normal. It was that, no, Zach is. Yeah. It says Jane Terry. I'm sorry, Jane Terry and Zach from housing.
Exactly.
And Zach, you turned on? If you can't turn on, it's okay.
I'm here. Nope, all good.
All right, great. Sorry, Terry. I said Terry. I mean, I'm sorry, Jane. I said Terry, but it's Jane. All right. All right. So everybody heard the clarifying or heard the kind of lineup of questions. What we're really ultimately trying to look at is what does this GLUP designation come down to? So first, anybody who knows when I chair a meeting, we just go around the table. That is the most efficient. Yep, we're gonna just go around and around. So first question, does anybody have any clarifying questions? Do you have any clarifying questions about? No? Eric does.
Yeah, what's the height of the current building?
Does anybody here know other than Barnes? Does Barnes know?
I think it's 40 feet.
Yeah, it's roughly 40 feet, three stories.
Okay, and so 40 feet is kind of the ballpark of what we're looking at for what you're looking to do here.
Exactly.
Okay.
Yep.
Okay, clarifying question?
Yeah, I have more than one, actually. I wanted to ask about the potential trip analysis that was done. It made it look like there are many, many trips taking place out of that building every day. And I would turn to my neighbors, but every time I get the sense that the building is not currently heavily occupied. And it has been that way for quite some time. So I just wanted to point out that that analysis might not be really up to date, because right now that parking lot is pretty much out.
Is your question how current is it?
Yes, how current is that analysis and is it up to date?
The trip generation analysis is based on a set of assumptions. And so it's based on what a typical office building of that size would typically generate. So it sounds like maybe this isn't at full occupancy. So there's probably a differential between the two, but it's based on the assumption of a fully occupied building of that size.
Okay. Yeah, I just like to point out that the actual change in current trips would probably be pretty significant based on the current usage. I have a second question, which is around your definition of the current uses around the site being quote unquote generally uniform. I just want to make sure I understand the definition of general uniform, because in fact, what we have is single family homes, another shopping center that is quite busy, a church, and a park. So do we consider that uniform?
I think we're talking about the low residential that's adjacent on two sides.
Mia, do you have any clarifying questions? Peter? Tenley?
What does the plan call for at this site? And what are we giving up as possible community benefits by not going with what?
So there's no adopted plan for this area, so that we're looking at what general land use plan category would be most appropriate. So there's no adopted plan for this area.
Jill?
I just want to make sure I understand this difference between by right and the site plan. And as it was presented, it sounds as if a site plan is required even though the number of units would be smaller, and a by right is permitted even though the number of units would be much larger. Am I hearing that properly?
So by right now, they have a split general land use plan and zoning designation. So by right now, it's commercial in the front and then residential in the back. So that's all that they could do at this juncture. If, there is support for a potential general land use plan amendment and a potential rezoning, if they came in with an appropriate site plan at some point, they could go ahead and, bring that forward for consideration. And if there was, let's say, an appropriate site plan, then the zoning and the general land use plan category could be changed at the same time that the site plan is approved. But then in terms of, let's say, there is support for a specific general land use plan designation, then, Natasha had also talked about some of the things that you could do by right if, let's say, it became low medium residential.
Okay,
So
so that
if
is correct, the way I'm understanding that.
Slightly.
Okay.
Slightly. What she was saying is depending on the designation,
Yeah.
it defines whether something is going to be by right or not by right. So at the end, your calculation is correct, right?
Okay.
Like if the designation is changed to R, whatever it was, they could go multifamily, right?
Right.
And have more
Without coming back for more permission.
without it. Yes,
Yeah.
exactly.
However, as part of the special general land use plan study process, no change is made to the general land use plan. That change, we just say, this is in the realm of consideration or not. And then the county board takes no action to actually change the land use designation until and unless there is an appropriate site plan application. So there's a whole nother round. If there's support for a change, there's the site plan review process. So nothing's
everything
proactively
has changed.
changed.
Margaret, is it possible that we could advertise a general land use plan and an applicant under a scenario where they could request a rezoning that would, in essence, allow by right development under one of the RA districts? I think our preference that we're communicating here tonight is that I think the importance of an ability to review an application, and we have the ability to review an application in closer detail through the site plan process. By right is something that you just have to meet the sort of the very, the minimum zoning standards, and there's no community engagement process. That is a possible outcome, but what you're hearing us signal tonight is a preference for a tool that would use the site plan process. But we haven't fully gotten to that conclusion yet, and wanting to really hear what people's perspectives are.
Thank you. Yes. Okay, Tony.
I got nothing right now.
Okay, and then Chris, do you have any clarifying questions?
Yes, I want to make sure I do this right. Are my clarifying questions, can they be directed at the applicant and the county staff, or is it just to the county staff?
Yeah, it can be directed to anybody, just clarifying questions on the presentation.
Okay, great. So on the presentation, one of the slides, you talked about how you do not want to do any commercial space. Yeah, currently, if I listen to it correctly, the front part is zoned commercial. Has the applicant, and I want to be respectful because obviously it's their property. Have you thought of the front part facing Wilson stay as low end commercial space, and then behind it be townhouses or housing? Have you thought of that option?
So that the rear of the lot is currently used, that huge surface parking lot. The residential component of the site is used to park the commercial component of the site. The parking requirements for the C1 the old 1950 C1 commercial district. It's onerous. It's quite high. It's one space per 200 feet for the first floor, then 250 feet and so on up the building. So this site for the commercial uses requires a substantial amount of surface parking that likely would not be replaced at the front of, would almost certainly not be replaced at the front of the site, continue to stay commercial. That those two rear residential lots would continue to be used as surface parking to support those uses.
Got it. Thank you. And I have a lot of comments, but I don't have any further questions.
Okay, Zach? Any clarifying questions?
Yeah, one question on the scenario comparisons under the multifamily rezoning option, the RA 8 to 18 by right. If you were to go with that course of action, would that preclude allowing the applicant to petition for additional density via a site plan?
Could I answer that?
Does that make sense?
Yeah, I can answer that. So first, I wanted to clarify something about this notion of a by right option at this site. What Jen was saying earlier is that, what we're in here to talk about is a general land use plan amendment. So it's just an amendment to the policy, the county's policy of the site as it relates to what kind of uses are appropriate here. A rezoning does not occur at the culmination of this process. A rezoning would have to be filed subsequent to a general land use plan process. I've been doing these projects in Arlington a number of years, and I've done dozens and dozens of projects in Arlington County. I have never known the county to accept a rezoning application without a site plan application in hand. In fact, I'm not aware if that's ever happened ever in Arlington County, at least since the 1980s. So there is no practice. I would not advise my client, it would be a good investment of his money to come in here and ask for a rezoning to 818 without a site plan and expect any kind of approval for that rezoning. So I don't see a subsequent by right application here happening with the Gallup Amendment approval. I don't think that's in the realm of reality.
Got it. That answers my question. Thank you.
Jane, did you have any clarifying questions?
I do not at this time.
Thank you. Okay, second question. Does the proposal need any, or do you guys believe that there's any proposed refinements to the guiding principles that are necessary at this point? Bob, any refinements of guiding principles? You want to put it on that slide? Yeah. Okay, we're going to load up Natasha's 4 guiding principles slide in case you don't have it. Eric?
Well, yeah, I do have a question about the first one. So that the first one says, if you want to load it up, I think it's slide 26.
Not yet. We're on 52.
I'm not sure.
I can't see that.
Oh, wait a minute.
What is
Sharing? Why is that not,
small code between?
I don't think you're
I can't
sharing.
even see it too.
Back there somewhere.
It's my head.
I'll bring it up.
Come on, Natasha.
Get it together.
Go ahead, Eric. You go ahead.
Well, all right. So my question is,
Read the principle that you're.
yeah, I'll read it. So, principle 1, proposed principle 1, it says ensure building scale, massing, and materials complement and transition well to the surrounding area, including the adjacent Dominion Hills neighborhood. I guess my question is, that makes sense on its face, but how is that consistent with, I mean, this is a little bit of an unusual application, not really, but it kind of is. So is that consistent with other processes where we would be looking at a redesignation for a site that was, primarily surrounded by, low density, single family neighborhoods and so forth? That's my first question.
Yes.
Is this consistent with that? So
Is this a typical general?
yeah, principle for that. Because what I'm trying to, I'll just spare, I'll give you the lead.
Mhm.
What I'm struggling with is, it's also a goal for us to provide more housing opportunities. We saw the examples of the townhouses on Columbia Pike, other places. I'm struggling with this being a proposed principle if the complement and transition language also may, prevent kind of opportunities within the site for said housing. Given the fact that, those neighborhoods were, single family exclusive for many, 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 many decades, are we then boxing ourselves in with this planning principle here, right? I know we can have a vigorous debate about, single family neighborhoods and EHOs and all that, but I think the reality is that we say that we want to build more townhouses. Are we then boxing ourselves out of being able to build more townhouses because there doesn't have to happen to be townhouses adjacent to this proposed site?
Is it a tautological principle? Okay,
Well
so
said.
maybe that's a statement.
Yeah, that's a statement with a question, so
Okay.
we'll leave it there.
Okay, do you have another one?
That's it.
Okay. All right, Terry, do you have any?
Yeah, my question is about principle 2, providing for attractive and welcoming pedestrian level conditions through landscaping, biophilic design, and street parking. And actually maybe also 3, I guess I'm wondering where traffic comes in, and the possibility of increased traffic, and where do traffic studies kind of come into play here? One thing I'm thinking about is that that's a highly residential area. I'll point out that most of our homes at Dominion Hills do not have garages, so we heavily use street parking. I'll also add that is a very popular pedestrian crossing. It currently has a marked crosswalk, so I don't know if it's possible that there might need to be a stoplight there if we're adding up to 16 potential homes. So I guess I'm wondering if those principles need to be considered.
So we've done the preliminary transportation analysis, which is, as we noted, based on certain assumptions now. So if this should advance to a site plan project, then the applicant will be required to provide a full transportation analysis. And then we actually do have DES staff online if you need more clarification than I can provide. But, should, for instance, the warrants, the number of trips generated warrant some additional, mitigations, then that would be evaluated at that time. But based on our preliminary analysis, it does not look, residential development typically generates less traffic than commercial. So it's not anticipated that there would be an issue in terms of capacity on this arterial.
Margaret, do you want to comment, or maybe Angie or others? The question was also about, is traffic sort of embedded into these guiding principles? And I think we've got a response.
Yeah. So, in terms of access, connectivity, and safety, that's all addressing all modes of traffic. So the cars, bikes, pets, everything. And then I don't know if Angie wanted to add anything more, or if there's any more sort of follow-on questions you have.
I could add something that's helpful. I think this is one of the reasons, we've had these same thoughts about this site. And it's one of the same reasons why I don't think anybody would ever allow a project like this to go through any kind of by right rezoning, just rezoning into by right construction. We've already considered all of these aspects in our sort of thinking and budget, and it's going to be a big lift for this site. The amount of landscaping, when we did our test fits for the open space, we're looking at 57%, right in that ballpark of open space and landscaping, a substantial amount. And of course, traffic mitigation, biophilic design, all of our townhouses are incorporating on-site in-garage parking with visitor spaces on-site. So we plan the visitor spaces on-site in our concepts as well. So our goal is to have no parking impact outside of the neighborhood for the units. And then, as Margaret was saying, we would have to pay for and provide a parking management plan and a traffic impact analysis to make sure that how we access the site and where those access points are wouldn't have any sort of negative impact on the neighborhood or the intersection on which the site sits. Make sure it operates at optimal levels, continues to operate at optimal levels. But for that reason, that heavy lift needs to go into a site plan process.
And to further what Tad said, the plans that were drawn by us were preliminary at this point, and staff also came up with some preliminary plans. All of them were contemplating a project that has 2 spaces per unit inside of the unit with guest parking. So it's roughly at 2 1/8 spots per unit. So there's significant parking on that site.
So quick, let's contextualize where we are right now. We are not in site plan. All right, we are at LRPC, and we have 2 more rounds of questions, plus half this room hasn't had a conversation about number 2. So I want to stay out of site plan and stay on question around proposed refinements to the guiding principles. Nia, do you have any proposed? Peter?
No.
Okay. Tenley's gone. Jill?
No, thank you.
Tony?
I would like to add explicitly to number 4, the biophilic design. You just mentioned that. I liked it. So
It's in number
Trust.
2,
Oh,
other
it is number
biophilic
2?
design and screen parking.
oh, look at that.
No refinement.
Okay.
I read them.
Yeah. I like it explicit.
Yeah.
Commissioner,
Yeah,
Commissioner Guerin would be proud.
she's proud. She's proud of you, yes. Chris, do you have any proposed refinements to the guiding principles?
Yeah, I just want to address the gentleman that went first on number 1. You actually do have an example of existing multifamily dwellings in that area, and that is the Patrick Henry Apartments. Now, probably not the best example of what you want to build or the applicant wants to build, but you do have those. So there is an example there. And I want to go back to something I believe Terry said to on the number 3. If we're going to really talk about enhancing access, connectivity, and safety for all modes of travel, if you build townhomes there that you are expecting families to live in, those families are going to probably be going to Ashlawn, which will be a walkable community. You absolutely need to, I would strongly urge the county to reconsider putting a traffic light at that intersection. That intersection right now is a very dangerous intersection, especially coming out of Livingston onto Wilson. And Josh could certainly public comment talk about that, but those are 2 things that are important to me.
Thank you. Zach?
No.
Thank you. Jane?
I'll just state support for ensuring the safe mobility of families trying to get around, especially to and from schools, and anything that can be done to support that through crosswalks, signalized crossings on Wilson Boulevard right there. I think it should be a priority.
Thank you. All right, trade-offs. Let's start moving 3 and 4 together. Because I think that's the bulk of the discussion for this evening. Everybody has kind of talked about what the trade-offs are. Tad talked about what the applicant needs in terms of making this project happen.
That's right.
16 units.
Yep.
And staff has talked about what their preference would be. So, I mean, really, we're looking at the difference, and I wrote this down. I can't even find my notes. There's too much written on my paper. Between low residential and low medium. So there's trade-offs in these proposals. I don't want you guys to get bogged down by the diagrams that you've seen, all right? Because once again, let me just remind you, we are not in site plan review. All we are doing right now is talking about what is important at this site. It does not include crosswalks, safety lights, traffic lights, any of that stuff. That is just too far down in the weeds. We are at LRPC right now. So we are just talking about what we would want to see in this space and what we are asking staff to consider. Okay, we don't have a fully fleshed out site plan to look at right now. We don't have a traffic study to look at. We don't have, designs to look at. We don't know what the materials will be right now. But we're talking about big picture items that we need to be thinking about at this time with regard to this particular site. And again, for those of you who've not visited the site, but potentially have driven by, we're talking about the site that is Dominion Hills, that commercial space. If you've gone to Home Depot, you've probably taken a right at Patrick Henry Apartments, right? It's just down the street from there, all right? Okay, Bob.
Okay.
Yes.
I don't live in that neighborhood, but I've been to that Pizza Bowl League a billion times, so I've been by your property many times. And I'm a runner, so I run by, so I'm familiar with it. In terms of trade-offs, that's a very relevant topic. I represent the Forestry Commission here in Arlington. So tree canopies, my thing.
Big deal.
And natural resources are my thing. And my stock preface when I comment at these meetings is that Arlington's tree canopy is in crisis. Not just we need a couple more trees, it's in crisis. It's gone from 40% to about 33% in the last 10 years, largely because of clear cutting of lots for both commercial and residential development. So it's a real sensitivity area. I really applaud the staff for putting into your presentation, not just an emphasis on trees and green space, but you actually mentioned the Forestry and Natural Resources Plan, which came out last December, which is now the 12th spoke of the county's comprehensive plan, which means that trees aren't just, oh, let's consider it when we get to it. Not just, oh, yeah, it might be a trade-off. It is just as important as housing, transportation, everything else in the county's plan, stormwater, everything. So it's important, and Arlington has made it a priority. So as you can tell, I favor a plan that will be that will have open space, it'll have green space. I'm encouraged by the gentleman mentioning that you're shooting for a 57% open space and landscaping coverage. I think that's great. I'm encouraged that you're saying you don't want 36 units, you want 16. And I think that's good because it offers a good balance. It's 16 more residences than we have right now, but it's not overloading the site based on what's around it and cutting down every tree that's there. I would say this is preliminary because I haven't gone back and vetted this with my commission, but I kind of know how my commission thinks. So I'll say preliminarily, we would lean toward the low residential rather than low to medium. That is because it has a maximum of 15 units, and not that I don't trust you guys, but once something gets changed, it could go up to 36. So I think that's pretty close to what you're looking for, 15, 16 units on site. I think a low residential designation would certainly allow a lot of room for conservation. And I think I'm going to put in a pitch here that when you get to the point where you're actually building something, there's actually a site plan and it's been approved. My commission and many residents of Arlington would really prefer that you not clear cut the site, but that you actually come up with a plan where you can save some of the trees that are there, save some of the canopy that's there. And I think that a target of 15 to 16 units would enable you to do that and still meet your needs.
Can I respond to that real quick?
No.
I just want one last comment and then I'll stop.
We're not responding.
Oh.
We're not a site plan. We're just gonna go around and thank you.
Yeah, there's one thing I think there's a misunderstanding about. We're talking in two different sets. We're thinking 16 units for the site. They're talking about
12.
low is 15 units per acre. We're not even acre, so they're actually proposing something around 11 or 12 units. So if we're proposing 16 units, you know.
Okay, I'm sorry, I apologize. I misread the slide. I thought that's what would be allowed.
And that, yeah.
0.86 acres.
Right, and that's the reason we're having trouble with the low designation, because it's just not enough to get a project to move forward at 11 or 12.
But I do want Natasha to clarify something, because one of the questions that came up during our pre-conversation, our pre-meeting in preparation for this meeting was why can there not be a configuration that allowed for, you know, let's say 12 townhomes and then a multifamily unit as well. And I think that may be helpful also for people to understand that.
At the end, it's a balance of green space and parking areas. I think, Tad, you described it when you talked about the commercial, right? With the larger parking ratios, that's just going to take up a lot more of the site. So the minute you're trying to combine multiple types of uses, parking is always going to be the dictating factor for the design of the site. But yeah, at the end of the day, it's a balance. If you want to keep trees and you want to provide green space, then you're going to have less development.
So the comment I'm making is the balance needs to be a real balance. You
Yeah.
need to keep trees. And so I guess maybe I should have asked this question when it came around. It occurred to me after the round of questions, but would low medium residential allow for site plan review?
That's what Tad was saying earlier, is that he has, that was his comment around. He has not ever experienced since at least 1980. I didn't put you back then, but since at least 1980, where something has gone in without site plan, or something has gone in and said, we are doing everything at the same time, including a zoning.
So forgive my lack of trust in the sense that I don't distrust you guys, but I've been involved with other site plan reviews and time with the commission. And I found that there's been a plan that we've talked about at length, and then suddenly the plan changes at the last. And it doesn't look like the nice drawings. And there's more units and there's fewer trees. And so I guess from a long range planning review perspective, I would like to at least get to a change that would kind of ensure that that site plan review does occur with some promise or some stick that the county has or something to ensure that that sort of dialogue can happen before the final plan.
And I think what already Jennifer has said is that they are looking for the most amount of review possible. But I want to kind of just reconcile your comment here, and which I think is, I thought you were almost going to miss the point about natural resources being part of the comp plan, because that's my favorite part of your speech.
I go to bed every night saying.
I like it. I like it. I like it. So, but your comment is the balance needs to tip in favor of tree canopy.
Not in favor, but just not as an afterthought.
Not as an afterthought. Okay, thank you. Eric.
All right, I'll be brief. Yeah, I thought Bob had some great comments, and I appreciate that. I think there's some good context about, site plan discussion here as well. And I know the applicant has expressed a lot of interest in tree and open space, green space. So I actually have a lot of confidence we can figure that out. The site plan process, more confidence than, when folks have by right abilities, right? In a lot of our low density neighborhoods, they just clear cut, right? We all see that, and I think have some concerns about that. So I'm going to go back to the housing, because we are talking about providing housing here. I will push up against this idea of there being it cutting against equity because it's luxury housing. All new housing is called luxury. Like we have an affordable housing master plan. We want to provide more housing. So thinking about long range planning principles here, getting back to the point, Vachi, I strongly prefer the low medium residential categories as opposed to the low one. I want to provide flexibility. The applicant here has already said that they actually don't want to go as dense as that category may allow. I understand that, thinking about precedent setting, I think I'm not as concerned about that. We've got a housing crisis. We need to be thinking about townhouses as a practical option for a lot of folks and throughout the county. And I think it's a little disingenuous for us as a community to say we care about housing affordability, or at least we care about housing supply, because go on Redfin, good luck. And then saying no to maybe a practical option for a lot of folks in our community. We got a lot of townhouses along Columbia Pike. You saw the Walter Reed one, which is awesome. And so there's no reason why Langston and Wilson shouldn't have, these options. So I think let's do low medium. And then I think, a lot of folks have good concerns, and that's exactly what our site plan processes, I think, are made for, and we can get into the details. So that's it.
Thank you.
Yep.
Terry.
Yeah, I want to echo the comments from Bob about tree canopy, and to place this into the larger context, as you mentioned, we are currently in the midst of a pretty major development that you're probably familiar with, just down the road, the Toll Brothers, the Grove, where we did in fact see the clear cutting of about 9 acres, including countless mature trees. So I guess, and this may have been maybe should have been a clarifying question. And I should add, I live adjacent to that, so I've experienced it like very personally, directly. So I want to emphasize the importance of mature trees and the ability to preserve those. Toll Brothers has been very gracious and very thorough in planning to plant new trees, including native species, which is great, but they really do not replace the benefits that the mature trees that we had on site previously. And I really just want to echo what Bob said in terms of the importance of trees for our public health, for our individual health, for our mental health, that is well documented. You're also probably familiar with the Arlington 2050 process. It's in process and going on currently, so I don't think they have anything official, but I was at that kickoff meeting. I heard so many people say trees. So I just want to echo those points.
Thank you, Nia.
Clearly at this point, you've laid out your numbers, so you know what's going to work. So if it were built today, what would those costs be? What would somebody buying one of those roughly price? Ballpark.
I think that's a question for you.
I mean, it's hard to say at this point, and obviously it depends on the amount of units that go there. But if you look at this from an economic standpoint, the more units that there are, gives you the opportunity to spread the development cost of the project and be able to keep the unit pricing down. So putting less units on here, if this project were even viable, which I don't think it is a low density project, all that would do would, in essence, you'd still have all of the same costs that you go through, but you've got to apply that over 12 units versus 16. It's a 25% base increase per unit.
And if you put 16 out there, if you get 16, if it were out there today, what would it cost roughly? I mean, just a guess, over $1 million, correct?
Would have to be.
It would have to be. Okay, that was my point. Okay. So thank you. I had the benefit of actually touring this site as a business manager here in Arlington, thinking that we might move our commercial business. And I was looking at everything and I heard Barnes speak about at a county board, talk that it was very difficult for him to rent this space. So thinking, let me go over there. It's less expensive than the things on the corridor that we were looking at. It is a ways out there. It's far quieter than anything. And certainly less expensive. There were no perks, unlike when you shop in the corridor, the landlords will give you perks to encourage you to come. There were none of those. I found that kind of interesting, but it was a distance away, but the parking lot was very attractive. So the building is pretty old in there. Let me just say that. I will echo Bob's comments on the trees and yours, particularly for preserving the mature trees. I'm glad to hear that the neighbors are all for that. I would be disappointed if they're not. Like I said, when I was there, I didn't perceive a whole lot of traffic there because it was kind of dead actually. And so from the standpoint of my business where I would have to have it, didn't make a whole lot of sense for me, but for residential, yes. So, and I'm hoping there will be a process where more people can weigh in. As a former civic association president, for anybody who is on this, I never sat through a site plan process where I didn't see significant change by those people who sat at the table and made their comments, and it was always improved to the betterment of everybody, even though it was changed. So those are my comments.
Thank you. Peter?
Ditto on the trees, and I think your wording was 16 units makes the economics work.
That's correct.
And by that, do you mean that anything fewer than 16 won't work? It may not work. It's possible it wouldn't work. Is there a way to?
We're not doing this deal. It's at less than 16 units.
Thank you. Thanks for all the comments on the tree canopy. I worked hard on the forestry natural resources plan, so I fully endorse all of those comments. Having said that, I'm also the park steward at Upton Hill, volunteer, and I'm very interested in all the mature trees there, all the invasive species we're trying to get out. Be very, very happy if you didn't put any invasive species in your landscaping that would escape to the park. But I want to get to the point, which is the density of housing is really important in Arlington. And it just so happens that that is a fairly well canopied area because you do have the parks there. And it is a balancing situation. And I have a question. I don't know if it's appropriate to bring it up now, but and I also know some of my park volunteers come on the bus. Anyway, all this is stirring around in my head about whether we could get away with fewer parking spaces in favor of having maybe disabled, housing for people who are on the bus. And if they don't need the parking spaces. So it's just an idea, but yeah, okay.
Well, that actually raises an interesting thing that I was also rattling around in my head. Is there any, when it comes to this sort of site plan process, any sort of potential to work in sort of units for people with disabilities or affordable units? Is there any kind of consideration on that front, or is it economically viable on that front? I'd like to hear both sides if possible.
Why don't you start with whether or not that's something you would consider?
Yeah. I mean, site plan. There's there's requirements by ordinance. So there's contributions to base densities. It's uncommon to see. It's not common county practice to do ownership units in the affordable housing contribution realm. When they adopted the affordable housing ordinance, it was predominantly aimed at rental units at 60% AMI, and that's how the whole system works. It's how our affordable housing providers work. I did a for sale scenario down at Key and Nash, the Key and Nash project in Roslyn, and we actually did 4 for sale units there. We had to go to Chainbridge Bank to set up a loan program just for those units, and those things, they lent the money on those based on their anticipation of the rise in income levels. So there was an appreciation on the units, the valuation based on income. But we had to set up our own loan program and hook them up with the money. And that was because the county had, I think, Jen, correct me, most Carver Homes did one too, but they're unusual. And so I think it would be something we'd have to just solve for because those are big numbers.
Right.
One, like the ones that down there, they only sold for a couple of $100,000, and between the cost of building the unit and then the lost cost of, it's a loss. It's a big loss leader. Our 4-unit contribution wound up being, close to a couple $1 million worth of affordable housing. But that was for a much larger project. That was a 72-unit or 80-unit condo and townhouse deal. So something of this scale would have to be something that works. And, if you squeeze the balloon, then it pops out somewhere. So, if we're looking at tree canopy and streetscape, and so it's just got to, what's great about the site plan process is it flushes out where the county's priorities are. And we typically contribute where our values are. And that's a community discussion at this site where would the values be. Right.
I think you said it, right, which is unless the applicant is willing to go down that route and figure out the financing and whether or not a project of this scale can actually assume that type of product. I mean, the policies are in place to encourage affordable housing and accessible units in the whole. I think we have that in place, but we can't force an applicant to do anything unless, I mean, all we can do is negotiate at the table when there's any bonus density that's being sought, And so that really boils down to what is the application, what are they asking for? And so sitting here today, back to your point of view, which is we have to stay up here, high level, we're not going to know the answers to those questions until there's an actual application in place.
Okay, can I come back to you? It's
Yes.
8:26. We have to stop this discussion at 8:40 to be able to do public comment. So Chris, do you have a comment on trade-offs and?
Yeah, I'll be as quick as possible. Look, I polled our neighborhood on this project, and there are a whole bunch of comments on it, but basically the majority agree that, like, look, if the property owner wants to build 12 or 16 or whatever makes economic sense for them, because obviously somebody wants, they need to turn a profit. We're fine with it. The issue is I'm going to echo the tree thing, right? Like that is absolutely important. I'm on board with that. But I also just want everybody to sort of realize from North Frederick Street, which is the street right behind the Wilson on Safeway, all the way to McKinley, which is the Rouse property, you basically have an economic dead zone, right? And you also have a major transit corridor. So, hey, more density along that corridor, fine, not a problem. But whatever makes economic sense to the owner and the builder, as far as it meets, saves trees and makes economic sense and is value to the community, hey, it is what it is.
Thank you. Zach?
Sorry. The Housing Commission has not taken an official position on this project, but I generally know how most of the commissioners feel, and I would say we err on the side of building more units. So I think the low medium designation would be our preference. I mean, bottom line is we have a housing crisis. We're short 4 to 7 million units nationally, and it's costing our economy $2 trillion annually in lost economic productivity. So we need to do what we can to solve that problem.
Thank you, Jane.
Yeah, just appreciate the conversation on the tree canopy and all the time that was spent there. Certainly something that we support, but I do just want to take a minute to just reiterate the need for safety. And I know that's one of the points. Several of the fatalities we've had in Arlington County are in or near school zones over the past few years, and it is very close to a school zone. I don't I understand you want to stay high level, but if we're going to be serious as a county about committing to Vision Zero, this should be integrated into every point of what we're doing as we're planning where we're going in the long range for the county.
Thank you. Tony, I know you were not here for most of the second part. You're good? Okay, all right. I just want to, I guess, echo some of the comments that were made around tree canopy as well. I think it's particularly important. You know, Bob, I will say that I do appreciate every time you say, again, that it's, you know, part of the comp plan. But the other thing I want to say is I think the reality of the situation is the housing issue, right? It is so important to online more townhomes in this community. And I think that the work between the applicant and the staff on what is truly realistic in this space, what really does make sense is important, is an important conversation to have. Because I think when you say, Tad, we can't do this under this amount, like we would have to walk away. I certainly wouldn't want this project not to come online if we weren't able to have like just a real honest, not we would not all be there, but you two, we're not able to have a real honest conversation about the economics of the project. And one thing, and I'm not going to attribute this to my mind because it is not smart enough to be able to dissect this, but Daniel Weir and I have had a conversation around, you know, when we start thinking about what the cost of housing is, and I appreciated your cross-examination of the applicant today about what this looks like in terms of price. But, you know, Daniel raised a really important issue that I think that we often don't think about, which is, you know, when we build housing, particularly this type of housing that doesn't exist in Arlington County at a great rate, townhomes, and we are filling the gap there with that type of diversity in housing. We are also filling the gap for housing affordability 10 years down the road, right? 20 years down the road, right? Because equity and things for these types of housing types, depending on where they're located, a number of factors, right? But we are also creating diversity around affordability in that sense. So it's speculative, certainly, but can it be based on kind of pragmatic economic principles? I think yes. And so I just think that when I'm looking at trade-offs, when I'm looking at kind of practicality, this is going to rest in the hands of the further conversations between county and the applicant, because I think that what you're hearing today is, yes, it's very important for us around trees and preserving as many trees. And when you're looking at that, how do you still get the deal done? So with that, we've officially finished our defined agenda, right? I want to move on to public comment now. I'm going to start with you, Josh. Do you have comment? Let me put on my timer. 2 minutes, okay? Let me get my timer together, Josh. Hold on.
Did you, yeah, only one person online.
Online, yeah. Okay, hold on 1 second.
Well, while you're doing that, just to introduce myself.
I got you. You ready?
I live in the neighborhood.
Okay.
Working out in Hill Park, and I'm on the neighborhood Boulevard Manor Conservation Beautification Committee. So yes, very concerned about the trees. Pleased to hear there's already 40% coverage with mature trees around most of the building. So from that perspective, prefer option 3 or option 4 as site plan process, lower density of the group. Should be clear here, nobody's arguing against townhouses. So half of these criticisms or encouragement of townhouses has been misplaced. The question is whether it's going to be 12, 14, or 16. The lower numbers provide greater opportunities to conserve the existing trees. I think it's very important. Existing trees, cut and then replace the existing trees. And then finally, 12 townhouses at $1.5 million, which is probably will go through kind of makes you $18 million. So I don't know where you are in your kind of calculations there, but that's still a huge chunk of change. So it's I don't know. The question of feasibility is how much profit you're going to make off of it, or then you can't do the project or not. And then finally on the traffic, yeah, we need a light there now. So I think if you go forward with this, you're going to find out. That's the comments from my end. Thanks.
Thank you. All right. So.
Oh, sure. Yeah, I
Ready?
thought I was second to last on the list. But yeah, Clayton Murtha, we live on the North Livingston Street 870, so we're not the house adjacent, but one over. I think broadly, and I might dispute, I would love single family homes there. So I don't know if everyone's on board with townhomes, but realize obviously the economic feasibility of that. The guiding principle behind all my comments is density related. I don't know if it's a consideration, and I don't know if this is even the appropriate venue for this conversation, but to zone it as like an R6, which I believe is what all the other residences are in that area, and would be 1 to 10 per acre. But I think both maintaining consistency with the character of the neighborhood and density, which the more units you put, the more overcrowding that would occur in that space, which is kind of point one. Point two being parking. I know there's 2 point whatever spaces per unit currently planned for. We have 2 people, we have 3 cars, so we would exceed that already. I also read in the public or the letters of support that oftentimes the businesses use the parking lot on the weekends, and so you'd imagine there'd be a lot of spillover parking, both from residents and then employees or visitors of the strip of businesses that are right there. So parking's a major concern. We'll echo all the tree comments, but I don't think we need to go into that. What else? Yeah. Anything else? Try not to go over my time.
Yeah, 14.
The height of the building's obviously a concern. I know the Dominion Hills conservation plan is 35 feet. That would be ideal or less. And then the last thing being, there's a lot of young families in the Dominion Hills neighborhood, so we're obviously including ourselves. So we're very concerned about construction.
Thank you. All right, so we have Barnes, you're up.
Okay, 7 of us bought this building years ago, and we were all professionals here in Arlington. And about 2 years ago, we encountered some vacant space, and my partner here tried to lease it. We just did not have any luck, and then we thought about selling it. And we had some very, we had some proposals that I knew the community would not like. Things like 7-Eleven, urgent care, doctor's offices. And we care about the community because we're in the community. And the person who we picked to develop this property is Brian. And I've interacted with him for years. He's a man of great integrity. And I think I did the community a big favor by selling the property to Brian. 2 things I want to share with you all. One is the concern about crossing Wilson. Chris Zimmerman and I years ago got a light that you can press coming from the skateboard park over to what used to be a store. And the kids were running across Wilson. And then the second thing is the traffic is light right now because we have a floor empty, and part of the floor we use for storage. So thank you.
Okay. So we have Alan.
Yes, hi, Alan Frank. I'm managing member of the LLC, and I used to be in the building as a tenant as well. So we had lawyers, a law firm on the first floor, accountants on the second floor, and a law firm upstairs. We set out to replace it with the same kind of uses, and we just totally failed on that. Instead, we got masseuses, a lot of masseuses. They wanted small spaces for month-to-month sort of things. We did get some medical attention, but we can't do that because of the parking requirements for medical. And that's just really what I wanted to add is that reinforce that we're just having a tough time with that.
Thank you.
Thank
you. Okay, Todd.
Yeah, Todd Stevater, I'm a neighbor. I live on Livingston Street right across from, like, and not directly across from the property, but essentially across from it. I appreciate the staff's work and all the analysis. And to me, having a required site plan analysis that comes with this R15 designation makes a lot of sense, because I also have learned that, no offense, but you really can't trust developers in these sort of situations, and they will just try to add as much density as they can. So ensuring a site plan evaluation, I think, is really important to that specific designation. Some things that are important to me as a neighbor, I think, are the kinds of things that would get included in site plan review, like how the units face, do they face the street or not? Preserving the tree canopy is obviously really important. One thing that hasn't really been talked about in specifics are the safety issues with the aprons and the vehicular access into the property. Right now, in that end of Livingston Street, there's actually 4 access points to commercial, 2 on each side of Livingston Street. And that is a side of Livingston where there's lots of kids and families that walk to Ashland, to Skate Park, Upton Hills Park. So I would like to see 0 vehicular access from Livingston Street right there. And that's something that's important to me that I hope we can address in the site plan review if that, that R15 designation gets approved. My comments.
Thank you very much. All right, Frank?
Frank Foley, with the applicant, also a 40-year resident of Arlington and been involved in real estate development in Arlington all 40 of those years. First, thank you to the Long Range Planning Commission for your thoughtful and equitable comments and insights. I have been involved with sector plans. I was on Clarendon sector plan and Crystal City plans. I actually started the Crystal City repositioning back in 1999, and can comment to the fact that density is always perceived as something that's terrible. But when you look at Crystal City today, and you now have 30-story buildings, and the impact on the street is not, oh God, that it's fallen apart. Traffic is too much, the transportation is too much, people are too much. It is part of what we've done in Arlington. The county has gone ahead with the EHO plan to, I don't know, 36, 48 units per acre. This is a chance to work within the existing framework of the county and the zoning system to achieve those kinds of alternative housing projects. The county over the past 20 years has virtually eliminated townhouses. The Historic Conservation District prevented the transition of any multifamily, small 40, 50, 60-year-old apartments that are functionally obsolete to be converted to townhouses. They took out the by right use in C2. So now the windshield wiper is pushing water the other way. And we're really talking between 12 and 16 units. And the R880, R818 plan zoning designation and the light residential medium, low medium designation all go to site plan. So the R15T isn't the only way to get to the site plan. The R818 will be with the site plan. So the ability to stay at the 16 units, meet the 56% lot coverage is covered.
Thank you. All right, last one, Michael, online.
Yes, Michael Augustine. I am a neighbor of the building. I'm on Lebanon Street. I've been here nearly 25 years. So I've been by this building, walked or driven thousands of times. So I'm happy to see it go and be developed. I have reviewed the plan and I am in favor of this low to medium density. I will say that I am not in favor of any commercial space. In the time that I've lived here, there's been, for the majority of the time, there's always available rental space in the commercial building next door, the strip mall. So not in favor of commercial space. And then talking about safety, obviously that's a concern, but with my kids, I had 2 kids go to Ashland, never had an issue. We've got 2 crosswalk light walks there, lighted crosswalks, never had an issue in the 10 years I walked them to school. That's it for me.
Thanks so much. All right, well, listen, that is the end of our LRPC for the night. As I like to tell you all had a lot of different places you could have been here tonight, but you chose to be here with us. So thank you very much. Thank you for being very concise with your comments. And our discussion was, I hope, helpful to you guys as well. So thank you very much. Good night.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Frank had the most comment of the night, I think. So we'll talk about the tension between the imposition of the housing conservation district, am I right?